Hello, everyone. Right now it's in the morning, so good morning. But this is Elana Greenway Faniel of Greenway Law Firm in the Tampa Bay area. Today I am having a guest on, and we're going to talk about the intersection of family law and business law. So I wanted to have some experts in different areas who can talk about how the many different areas of law intersect, because they do. Oftentimes they do. And so today we're going to be talking about business law and family law, how they intersect, and some of the issues that come about in dealing with these different practice areas. So I have my colleague and friend, attorney Lisa M. Knox of LM Knox Law and Mediation. She's also in the Tampa Bay area. And so we're just gonna chat about some of these common issues, and of course on my end, some common questions that I get from, clients. And I say, you got to talk to a family law attorney, about some of these issues. So we'll jump right in. Lisa, you want to say anything at all?
Actually, Elana, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here today. We always have some of the most interesting, dare I say, the least interesting conversations about cases that intersect and so forth. So I really look forward to today and seeing what comes out of it. So absolutely. So we're gonna jump right in with this first question. Okay. Should spouses go into business together? Okay. So Lisa, I'll let you just answer that question, because I can just jump in and just give my little tidbit, but I want you to just give your straight answer to that question. Okay. Well, fortunately, I guess the answer is what, like a lot of our answers are in law. It depends.
Right.
So should spouses go into business together? It depends on when. Are they going into business before they become spouses? Or are they going into business after they've gotten married? What kind of business is it? Is it a business where they're both equally working in the business? Or is it a business where, one person is doing all the work and the other person is like, I'm the cheerleader, yay, but this is both of ours, where are they in their relationship?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's huge, because a lot of times people will jump into business and they'll think, I'll put my spouse on there, I'll add my spouse on there. And they haven't talked about the vision for the business. They haven't talked about, what their goals are for the business. They haven't made sure that they're aligned on those goals. Alignment is important on those goals for the business and where they are in their relationship, because like babies, businesses don't help parties stay together. Businesses will not help.
Wait a minute.
So, so you hear it all the time, like, my spouse and I are having hard times, or, my significant other and I are having a hard time, but you know what? This baby is going to bring us closer. No, it's not.
Right. Okay.
And, this business is going to bring us closer. No, that's not going to do it either. So it just depends, really.
Very true. Yeah, very true. I think those are definitely some good points. I would say, whenever, you're considering going into business with anyone, you want to make sure that you have a vision, you have a plan. And so when you're dealing with a spouse, the added element is not only are you working with them, but you're going home to them as well. And so, it could be a good situation. It could be a bad situation. So I like your point about how are they working in this business? Is one doing all of the work and one just kind of sitting back and, not doing as much, or just giving some advice, but they're still, co-owners? because that could become an issue. So going into it with a plan and saying, okay, here are your strengths. This is what I want you to do in the business. This is the role that you play. And then here are my strengths. This is the role that I'm going to play. And we're fine with splitting things or splitting, distributions or whatever it is, depending on the type of business. We're fine with splitting that 50-50. Or are we not fine with that, depending upon what the roles are? So
exactly,
there needs to be a plan in place.
Yes.
And also thinking about that added element that you're also going to have to go home with this person, and so
you're working 24/7, because you tell me a couple that works together that's not going to go home and talk about work, and I'll tell you a couple that's lying to you about going home and talking about work.
Right. So, and then where you are in the relationship is important too. I would say the stage, because, if you've been together for, quite some time, that person, right? If y'all just met, y'all are so in love, it's been 2 weeks and Lord, y'all just, you can't be without each other, and you're like, you know what, you got some style. Why don't we just start a little clothing business or something?
Oh.
And then it's only been 2 weeks and y'all are going into business with each other. And then you find out that they don't want to do anything. Okay. They just want to, for instance, they just want to model, or they just want to do this, that, and the third. They want to be the face, but they don't want to do the work.
Or worse yet, they want to do everything and they don't know what they're doing. I think that's even worse. A person who's not going to do the work, at least then, they're not messing up everything. Somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Somebody got to know what they're doing.
Right.
And have some sort of experience. And, that's across the board, I would say. You would want someone who has some experience in some aspect of the business, because other things you can hire, you can hire people to do other things, but you got to know a little bit about something and getting into business with each other. But what are some of those drawbacks or cons, would you say, in going into business with a spouse, besides you're with them 24/7? What would you say are one of those drawbacks?
Well, so once again, I'm still riding on the it depends bandwagon, because it really depends. Oftentimes, and I have found this even with relationships and divorces, where people are not, in business together, but they're getting a divorce. It's not, that they don't love each other or that they don't want to be together. It's that they did not have the uncomfortable conversations in the beginning. And so I think that's the same thing with couples who are in business with each other. One of the drawbacks is that you have to have the uncomfortable conversations. You have to have the unromantic, I don't know if that's a word, but the unromantic conversations. You have to know, is my partner a spender or a saver? And you can't assume that because they, save their personal funds, that they're going to also save the business funds. No.
Right.
They may be a person who always has like, oh, this is a great idea and that is a great idea. And I was watching the 3:00 a.m. infomercial, so now I feel like we need, we need this or whatever,
Yeah.
You need to have that conversation beforehand, as far as expectations and goals for the business itself. Oftentimes, and this, even as business owners, a lot of business owners don't have a roadmap or a plan.
Right.
And a lot of times, even as business owners, we have to get out of our own heads and our mindsets, because we might have a roadmap and a plan, but are we flexible?
Right.
Are we able to adapt? And so that's a conversation that needs to be had, because once again, what happens in business, because you're a couple, can absolutely affect your household. and vice versa.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Those are conversations. What are we going to do when we're mad with each other about, I'm mad with my significant other because, his mom is moving into the house, How are we going to take care of that with work?
Or what do we do when, because oftentimes in business you have ebbs and flows of revenue. What is our household going to do when we have those months that are slow?
Right.
Things like that. I think that's a great question, right? For any business owner, but definitely because it directly affects the household.
Right. But I think people, they get clouded with, the love and the romance and this is my baby and we're going to make it through. And I want you to make it through with your baby. I am, Elana, I am one of those divorce attorneys who loves marriage. I love a good wedding. Honey, I love a good wedding and I love a good romance story. Love it. But let's be real. Let's have these conversations so y'all can stay romantic, Let's do that. And realistically, and I dare say this. Now, you might have to edit this part out, but I dare say this. If you are in a relationship and you are considering starting a business with your significant other, and you are unable to have a conversation about realistic potential issues, how are we going to address this, and this? The unsexy conversations. You might want to evaluate, one, being in business with that person, but two, your relationship. Go ahead.
That is true.
Yeah. Edit it if you need to. It's okay.
You know what? I think you're right because, in a relationship, married or not,
right?
Well, especially if you're married, you're gonna have those really difficult conversations. You're gonna have those really difficult ones, and you have to learn how to communicate with each other and have those kinds of conversations. So I totally agree. I will add to one of those conversations needs to be, what happens if this doesn't work out? What happens if, we have to dissolve the business? What happens, if we don't work out?
Right.
And that is a very hard conversation because you don't want to talk about that, But if you're going into a business together, I would say absolutely need to have that conversation. What happens if this does not work out? In agreements and business agreements, depending upon the type of business entity that you form, you have certain agreements in place, and you wanna map out what happens if once this business dissolves, who's getting what's going where, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And then there's a whole nother element. If you're unfortunately getting a divorce or something, what happens,
Right. If I may, and this is a plug, not a plug.
Go ahead with the plug.
This is where it benefits you and your spouse to contact 2 people, 3 people actually. Your business attorney. So contact your business attorney. For example, Elana.
Right.
This is what we're thinking about, How do we put that in our business agreement? But then the second thing you need to do is contact your family law attorney. Lisa, this is what we want to do. How do we protect ourselves if things don't work out? Your family law attorney is going to say you need either if you're getting married, you need a prenuptial agreement. If you are already married, you need a postnuptial agreement.
Okay.
Okay. And I say a third attorney because each one of you needs an attorney if there's going to be a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement. For some reason, people don't like that idea. But if you want it to be worth a damn, you need to go ahead and you each need to have an attorney, right? And that's where that comes in, where you can then even have it to where your attorneys can facilitate a conversation. I've done this before, actually, Elana, where I it was sort of like a mediation or collaborative process where, you know, I represented one party, the other party represented, and we just sort of negotiated, and we involved, you know, a realtor, an appraiser, a real estate appraiser, because there were several properties that were involved.
Okay.
I think they had their CPAs, their respective CPAs come in. So we all had an idea of all the finances and so forth.
Sure.
And we drafted a prenuptial agreement. And when I tell you that prenuptial agreement, like if I could have just framed it and put it in my office, it was glorious.
I'm sure when you have all of those, those key people in there, to go back and forth and talk about, okay, well, we need to address this with this, we need to talk about this, we need to da because these are the implications, blah blah blah. That, I mean, you have a comprehensive agreement. Yeah.
And then it helps with the unsexy conversations, because it's not you bringing up stuff and then later on, after you all thought you have everything agreed, then bringing up something else. It's my attorney, you know, just brought this up. That's a good point. The CPA brought it up. That's a good point. The real estate analyst brought it up. That's a good point. And so it's not, you know, you poking holes in your relationship. It's people asking questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know? No, I think that's great. And it's, you know, great advice. I honestly didn't even know you could have a post-nuptial agreement.
Yes. Yes. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Now, sometimes, keep in mind, when you do a post-nuptial agreement, y'all got to be on the same page, because with the prenuptial agreement, it's like, okay, if we don't sign it, then we don't get married. With the post-nuptial agreement, it's going to be like, what, if we don't sign it, we're getting a divorce? Great. You know, you got a divorce without any prenuptial agreement, you know? So post-nuptial agreements, you have to be careful about, as far as being on the same page, making sure there's so much disclosure, nothing is hidden, and so forth, with both of them, for sure. But it's absolutely doable. It's not difficult. It's not hard. And it saves you down the line, because people, you know, I hear people all the time say, oh no, we don't have anything together. They have their bank account and I have my bank account. You know, we lived in this house, but my name is the only name on the house. And they think, okay, so we've done what we need to do. And they don't realize all of that is marital. So if one party has a business, if both parties, you know, if one party has a business and they use marital efforts and energies, that's a marital business. Or it can be argued that that's a marital business.
What are marital efforts, and what was the other word marital efforts and
marital funds?
Okay. Marital efforts and funds to build the business. What are marital efforts? What's the definition of that? Or is it kind of a gray area?
Marital efforts, when you look at it, is anything that you've used during the marriage for the benefit of a business. So marital efforts can be right up to your time. If you put the time in the business that you could have had and put towards your marriage, that's marital efforts. So a lot of people don't realize that when businesses are started, so when you're talking about marital assets, we're really talking about anything that has happened, incurred, been gained, been given, you know, from the time you're married, the time you say I do, until the date of filing.
Yeah, I don't.
Right, the date of filing.
Oh.
So here's what's funny. Here's what happens a lot of times, and people don't realize this, right? So one, they say, oh, I started this business before I ever got married, so this is not their business.
Okay.
Not necessarily. If you commingled any, you know, marital funds, like, you know, if you work a job, right, and your business is your side business, and you've gotten married, and you know, you use your monies from your work, you still work, but you've used your money from your work to your business, it can be argued that, hey, there's a portion of it that's marital. You know,
what about, so I've heard something like, let's say, okay, you know, I don't, you know, subscribe to those gender roles, but you know, the woman is, you know, raising the kids while the man is going out and building and sustaining this business,
Mm-hmm.
you know, is that a reason why that, you know, that business would be deemed marital property? Because, or is it because, you know, he could, you know, her raising the kids allows him essentially to spend that time in running that business. Yeah. Is that a reason why it could be deemed marital property?
It can be argued that, especially, you know, depending on when the business was started, how the business is funded, you know, and so forth and so on. So if the business was started during the marriage, absolutely. If the, you know, marital efforts, marital funds, you know, monies from the joint accounts and so forth are involved, absolutely. If wife is involved in the business, absolutely. If she's a stay-at-home mom, because here's the thing, let's just be very honest. Most of the time, typically, even stay-at-home moms still, if there's, you know, or stay-at-home dads, you know, if their spouse owns a business, and being equal with genders, if their spouse owns a business, stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad does still do some business does do some work for the business in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
You know, so a lot of times that happens. And so, yes, that is, you know, it's marital. If it was started during the marriage, absolutely. If there were gains and so forth during the marriage, it can be argued.
Now, if it's before, if it was started before, then mm-hmm. that particular spouse who started the business, they'd be fighting to make sure that particular business is deemed not marital property because they started it before the marriage, right?
Well, being honest with you, Elana, regardless of when the business was started, most spouses are going to argue.
They're going to fight. Okay. Yeah.
They're going to try to argue that it's not marital, or that it's not profitable, or that it's not. And that's the other thing. You know, the whole purpose of being in business is that, you know, there's a little bit of freedom as far as making some claims, some allowances, some write-offs, and so forth and so on. So there's also that, you know, the argument of, oh, well, this isn't quite as profitable as you may think, you know. But that is absolutely the argument. There's also, you know, and I think this is important when you look at things from a realistic point of view. There's an argument that can be made for any and everything. But I live by this code. Professor Mitch Frank taught it to me. First, the question is, you know, can I make this argument? You know, so one, can you do something? Then two, should you? And that's where a lot of people get caught up. So can the argument be made if I'm representing the spouse who, you know, was the stay-at-home spouse? Can the argument be made of, I want the business, I want half the business, I want half the business moving forward, or so forth? Can the argument be made? And if I look and I see that it can be made, then the second question is, should it be made? Like, does that make sense to make it?
Right.
And if so, when? And the reason I say does that make sense to make it, let's use, for instance, lawn care. And I've had this happen several times. Lawn care businesses. And the question is, you know, should the other spouse go after the lawn care business? You know, possibly. But if it's rented equipment, or if it's equipment that's old and so forth and not very valuable, then the only benefit you get from the business is that person's efforts. If they're the only person doing the lawn and it's that person's efforts, that's the only business benefit you get. And most people, if they know, hey, you're going to get a benefit of me doing this work, then guess what they do? They stop doing the work.
Sure.
So now you've spent monies, time, and effort on arguing for a business that ain't going to be worth, you know,
nothing without them, without that other person. Yeah.
Exactly. So those are the things that you want to take into effect. You know, those are the things that you want to take into effect, because you know you don't want to end up having that person close the business and sell everything, and you all get to split, you know, $4,000. You get $2,000 a piece. Then guess what? You know, you don't want that effort. So it just depends.
That's right. That's right. One of the things I want to mention too is, you know, in those agreements that I discussed, for instance, if you're starting an LLC, which is oftentimes the common business entity that new businesses form, you want to have an operating agreement. I don't care if you're going into business with your bestest friend in the whole wide world, or if you're going into business with your spouse who you love dearly and y'all, love each other to death. You want to have an operating agreement. And I know in oftentimes in operating agreements, you can have a clause in there that says, okay, even if this particular business is deemed, marital property, that the spouse, they would have to abide by the terms of the operating agreement. So even if they become a member of that LLC for whatever reason, they would still have to abide by the terms of the operating agreement. They can't come in and take over and do all these different things if that's not something that can be done within the framework of the operating agreement. So definitely having an agreement in place. And I stress this because a lot of times people skip that step.
They do.
They skip it. Yeah. And they go straight into, because it's fun. Well, let me not say it's fun, but it's exciting to, start a business and get the materials and develop the product and talk about marketing and all those things. Right. And they skip that step.
Right. Because it's an unsexy conversation.
That's right. It is the unsexy conversations that need to be had at that point. But it comes back to bite you real hard when you don't have it. Real hard. Okay. So don't skip that step. Yeah. Don't skip it. Get it done. Get those terms in place. And in the same way that Lisa mentioned, prenups, the post-nuptial agreements.
Yes.
Those sound like good options, so you can have, and that will better facilitate those conversations as well when you're talking about going into business with your spouse. Right. Anything else you want to add on this particular topic, Lisa, before we wrap this one up?
Well, you know what, Elana, I'd like to say this, and I say this, and we have our significant others and so forth. And so I'm telling the people out there in, social media land and TV land and wherever else, who will see this, I know that it sounds easier said than done, right? Because even as lawyers, knowing this stuff, it's still hard to have those unsexy conversations, right? But at the end of the day, you have to consider how much you honor, respect, and love that person. How much you honor, respect, and love that person. Because if you truly honor, respect, and love that person, whoever it is you're getting into business with, like Elana said, whether it's your friend, whether it's your significant other, whether it's a relative, so forth, if you truly honor, respect, and love that person, then you're going to want to sort of do what they call eat the frog, do the uncomfortable thing now, while you're still happy and excited and looking, optimistically in the future. You want to eat that frog now.
Sure.
Than to wait and now the relationship is crumbled, the business is crumbled, and think that y'all are going to be, still civil to each other.
And civil, yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Because oftentimes it's not happened that way. I'm sure you know.
Look, 85 times out of 10, people are showing out.
Those numbers.
I know. That's my whole point. That's my whole point. The math ain't math.
That's the
math. So, eat the frog now. Just eat the frog now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your input on this topic, and I hope that, those who are listening have gotten something, out of it, and will, walk into these kinds of situations more informed and know kind of what their options are. So I appreciate your time, Lisa.
I really appreciate you inviting me, Elana. Hopefully this will not be my last time. Hopefully I will be back.
Absolutely.